match the value नहीं मिल रहा है
For that value is 10k. हाँ क्या हाँ एक 5 है. So she pointed out one register having 5 bands. Okay. So you have to neglect the 5th band.
Neglect the 5th band,
which is nearer to the orange band. Okay. You have to start calculating from orange band.
First is brown and other two are black. First two will be the digit and third is black answer. Orange will be the brown का 1 आया, black का 0 आया, 10 हो गया, black is again multiply. Blue नहीं है, black. दोनों black, 2 black bands are there.
This is fine.
So this is what that resistor is. First is brown, other 2 bands have black.
Sir.
Okay. So first 2 will be the digits.
बस थोड़ी देर के लिए मैडम बोल.
हाँ, तो 2 bands will be the similar here, black
परमिशन
and
लेना
black.
तो पहले फिर
Right.
अपने वैसे कह रहे हैं.
So you have to consider 10 and orange will be here the multiplier band. Black and black जो है उसके 0 आपको वैसे के वैसे डिजिट के तौर पर लिखना है. If there in your resistor if there are total 5 bands, तो first will be the digit, and if the second and third bands are same color, then consider the digits of both also. I mean first 3 bands के आप digits लेंगे, fourth one will be the multiplier. So orange band will be the multiplier here. Okay, so that's why 100 के ऊपर हमने 3 zeros दिए, right? So first 3 digits 100 and then number of zeros. Orange band will be the multiplier. Is it fine till this? आगे बढ़े? Sir, can you?
Yes. थोड़ा बात सुन, उधर बैठ जाओ.
So this kind of observation table you can form for the various types of resistors, okay, which you have in your box. So you can calculate the values of those resistors by just observing the color codes. Next. Now again we will come to the energy flow. Just I explained you that energy flows from source to load, and we have just seen the resistor which dissipates the energy in terms of heat, and now we will come to the energy storing element, that is inductor and capacitor. Okay, so we will now focus upon the capacitor first, as there are so many types of capacitors. Paper capacitor, then electrolytic capacitor, polarized and non-polarized major categories of the capacitors, and by observing those we should be able to calculate the values of that. So in capacitors also there are in few capacitors you can find the color codes over that, but on few capacitors there are directly the values are printed, and on few capacitors there are the number codes. Okay, so you should be able to read the number codes and calculate the values of those capacitors. So, unlike the characteristics of resistor, capacitor is an energy storing element. So it has a memory, it has a past. So this is what a simple analogy shown here for a capacitor. So charging and discharging is the property of a capacitor. So here water analogy have been shown. So if you consider the water tank, and if you consider the 2 taps, upper and lower, and if you turn on the upper tap, then that water tank will fill with the water. So that we can relate with the charging of the capacitor. And if you release that water through a lower tap, then that will be the discharging of the capacitor. And the entire volume or capacity of that water tank will be the capacitor value, and the total height of that water inside that water tank is nothing but represents the potential V of that capacitor. Okay, so this is what a simple water tank analogy to understand the working principle of the capacitor. Next. So this is what a symbolic representation. We know that there are the two metallic plates, and in between them there is a dielectric medium present. So upper plate is positive, lower plate negative, and the direction of current is always from higher potential to lower potential. Next. Now this is what the most important energy storage equation. Remaining equations you don't go in detail, but the important one is the energy storage equation in case of a capacitor and the inductor. So here energy storage equation in case of capacitor, we know that E is equal to half CV square, right? C represents the capacitance, V represents the potential across that, right? So half CV square represents the energy storage equation. And in case of an inductor, the energy storage is half Li square. L is the inductance and I is the current flowing through that, right? So half Li square is the energy storage equation for inductor. Next. So we will come to the types of capacitor. Just like we have discussed the types of resistors, हमने दो type के resistors देखे, fixed and the variable, and we have calculated the values of the fixed resistors only. Okay, जिस पे color codes दिए थे. Now here we will be focusing upon both polarized as well as non-polarized. Okay, so do you know the difference between polarized and non-polarized? Polarized means which has a polarity, right? Positive and negative, right? So how to identify the which side of the capacitor is positive, which side of the capacitor is negative? So there is always a marking in case of radial capacitors. One side is denoted by a negative sign, minus wala sign hota hai. So by that way also you can identify positive, negative polarity of that capacitor. Otherwise you can identify by the length of the legs. जैसे कि two terminals होते हैं capacitors के two legs होते हैं, so one leg is slightly longer than that other one. So longer one always represents the positive, shorter one always represents the negative. So these are the two ways to identify the polarity of that capacitor. Okay. So polarized is categorized as an electrolytic capacitor, and the non-polarized can be the ceramic or polyester, metallized polyester, etc. Next. So this is a symbol just we have seen. Next. Unit of capacitor always represented in farad, right? And the prefixes are mostly, these are the most popular prefixes used, microfarad or nanofarad or picofarad. So what do you mean by micro? Micro is nothing but 10 to the power minus 6. Nano 10 to the power minus